Hey folks, just wanted to pop in really quick and say that the audio quality for the first minute and a half or so of this episode, after the theme music plays, is a little bit rough. I had my mics mixed up at the time, so sorry about that. It does improve after the reading on my end. Also, this episode does contain some strong language, and listener discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Trunk, reading the stories that didn't make it. I'm Hilary B. Bisniaks. Listeners, I am super excited today. We've been discussing having you on the show for like a while at this point, but I'm finally pleased to welcome Aimee Ogden. Aimee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And this season of all seasons to have two Aimees from the Midwest.
It's cool to be an Aimee, and it's cool to be from the Midwest.
It's very cool to be both of those things. Having never been either of them, I just have to take your word on it. But, you're very cool. Aimee Kuzenski is very cool. We're just going to go with it.
All right.
So we're going to be starting off this episode with a reading from Starstruck. Is there anything we need to know about it going in?
It is a young adult novel that I'll be reading a excerpt from my trunk from a few years back.
Fantastic.
All right. Starstruck. Only a single star had fallen on the city of Eltamile in the past 10 years, and that scarcity echoed in the city's empty streets, in the doorways of cracked buildings where nests of litter gathered. Wick stared out the little window in the 1.5-story nook where his mattress was tucked. He would probably never sleep here again. He wasn't sure he would sleep anyhow. The street below was dark. The street lamps had gone off one quiet morning months ago and never again turned back on. The occasional straggler hurried past, coat collar turned up against a cool wind that strained through the elderly fittings of Wick's window and stole the warmth from his nose and fingers. "Wick, what are you doing up yet?" The landing creaked under the weight of his cousin Kalen's feet. The dark of the street matched the dark inside the house. If Wick squinted, all he could see of her was the glint of her eyes in the smear where her face ought to have been. "Tomorrow's a big day for all of us. Get some sleep." She struck the mattress lightly with one hand. "Cozy up to the thought you'll never have to sleep on this sad old thing again." The nook was too small and the mattress too big, so that it curled up on either side into a sort of nest. Kalen routinely bemoaned that it was no sort of bedroom for a boy half-grown, but Wick had always liked it. "You're not in bed yet," he pointed out instead, "and Ismene is still downstairs too." Kalen and her wife would undoubtedly stay awake most of the night, packing and repacking the equipment from Kalen's bakery downstairs. Wick had retreated up to bed early after supper, so he didn't have to watch Kalen pretend she wasn't crying. Kalen huffed. If he were within reach, he would have gotten a flick of her apron. "You're 14 years old. I am a woman grown, and if I have to be a sleepless wretch on the train tomorrow, that is my own business." "Sounds like it'll end up being my business, too," he grumbled, soft enough that she could feign not to hear. He laid down anyway, cranking his neck so that he could still see out the window. A starstruck woman hurried past below. A cardinal, her beak just peeking up above her jacket collar and the red-gray of her tail flashing beneath its hem. Not the face he wanted to see. Not a human face, not his mother's face or his father's. He pulled the blankets up over his shoulders and bunched up their corner to buffer his head against the lumpy pillow. Kaelin hadn't moved yet. You'll be happy down east, in the Midland Lows. It'll be a real life for us there, all of us. Not all of us. This time he made sure to speak up. This time he made sure she didn't miss a word. Kaelin flinched, a hiss of air between her teeth. You know we can't follow them, Wick, and they are not coming back. Ismene had sent in their application for admission to live in the Protector's great city of Harrion, the one that had swallowed his parents up 8 years before. The paperwork had come back with the signature of Protector Ardelyn Peribert herself beneath the red stamp of denied. Oof. Harrion had plenty of bakers and builders and glowering boys. No more today, thank you. Well, so what if they couldn't just go up to the front gates of the city and knock to be let in? There must be other ways. She would have found a way in, he said, against his makeshift pillow. There was no sharp intake of breath then, not another word from his cousin, only her footsteps retreating back down the stairs. Life, she'd said, a real life. The words gnawed him, keeping him awake. There was only one real life, and that was the one where his whole family was together again. He sang himself to sleep, an old, old song that always made him feel a bit better. It put him in mind of his mother, although he couldn't remember her ever singing it to him, and Kaelin swore she'd never heard it, except from Wick's own mouth either. His arms went round himself, and as he drifted off to sleep, he sang the only lines, the only snippet of melody he'd ever been able to remember. The mountain is my pillow, the green earth is my cloak. I'm going to jump ahead a bit, more of the good stuff. Wick runs away from his cousin and her wife during an eruption of chaotic magic near the train station, finds some shelter in an abandoned toy shop, and for the time being subsists on scraps and a small relief package airdropped in by the protectors from Harrion, until he runs into some trouble he can't handle on his own.
We love to see it.
An hour or so later, Wick was ready to curl up for bed, but his stomach had developed a serious ache. After scraping by for a few days on scraps, being gifted with food had made him forget everything Kaelin had ever told him about table manners, and everything Ismene had ever said about common sense. All the chocolates were gone, as well as 2 tins of beans and 1 of fish. And now it was as if his stomach no longer knew what to do with food. He crawled into the pile of blankets and teddy bears and lay flat on his back with his hands on his overstuffed belly. His head proved to be equally overstuffed, with undigested thoughts instead of candy. How could he get to Harrion? Was it close enough to walk? How many days would that take? Weeks? Months? There were no more trains bound out of Eltamile, but perhaps there was another station to the south somewhere. He could head east toward the Midland Lows. He knew there was a station there after all. But Kaelin and Ismene could nab him for certain then. Were there still carriages or cars in the city that he could take? And if there were, would they make it all the way down slope in one piece, let alone all the way to the city? Could he scavenge enough food here for the trip? Or would he need to scout some out along the way? His eyelids drooped under the weight of possibilities. The door of the toy shop shifted in its frame. Wick sat up, bellyache forgotten. From behind the counter, he peered out at the door of the shop, but all he could see was the darkness that draped itself over the city at this hour of the night. It had hardly been a sound at all. Maybe he'd dreamed it. He started to retreat, and then his ears caught a scrape on the sidewalk. Someone was out there. You'll have to force the door, said a reedy voice outside, if you're up for it. Wick's mouth went dry. Starstruck wolves and bears and all sorts of creatures had lived in Eltamile before times changed, side by side with humans, not to mention the variety of Starstruck who were strict plant eaters or who were simply plants. But that had been before the life of the city began to peel away like the skin on an old onion. He had heard stories of hungry predators turning back to the ways they'd known before a starfall had changed their path. There were still laws, of course, but not anyone to do something about it when you broke one. And now, perhaps, a pair of predators had his scent? Wick shoved the last 2 food tins into his coat pockets and began to crawl toward the back door. Then he stopped, his heart twisting sideways. He'd almost forgotten his backpack. It was half empty, but the straps felt good when he settled them back around his shoulders. If you've got the wrong place, the raspy voice went on, you'll startle him off, and then where will we be? I haven't got the wrong place, said someone else, someone raspier and rougher sounding. Followed him here myself, and the fact the door is locked at all should tell you something. Look at the state of this place. It's been rifled 100 times, and now it's closed up snug. Another scratch. Claws on pavement. Wick banged his shin on the step up into the back workshop and bit his tongue to keep from yelping. Only a little farther to the back door, and he could... what? Run down slope to take refuge in Kalen's empty bakery? Try farther uphill and hope they didn't spot him? As long as this isn't just another of your glazed dreams, said the first voice, and something slammed into the door. Wick scrambled up and took off. No point trying to sneak now. He crashed through the workshop out into the back alley just as the front door gave way. He didn't stop to look over his shoulder. A howl slashed through the night behind him. Coyotes, then. He put his head down and tore through the thick darkness of the alley across toward Midtown. His eyes drank down the dark until at last they adjusted to the pale gloom cast by the faraway stars. He didn't hear footfalls behind him, but that didn't mean much. Over his gasping breath and the roaring in his ears, he couldn't hear much of anything at all. He risked a glance behind, afraid to see a fanged slice of shadow bearing down on him, but nothing was there. The alley mouth loomed ahead of him, and he half sobbed, half gasped his gratitude. He barreled around the corner into the Commons, where a few of the streetlights still worked. A coyote waited for him there, flanked by a mountain lion and a hunting hawk. Now, now, said the coyote. He stood very still, hands up. His clothes were fine and unmended, a silk vest over white dress shirt. Both were unmarked by brown stains. There were plenty of changes of clothes up city these days, no matter what you got up to at night. Wick stared at him. His chest heaved despite his best effort to look unafraid. Overhead, a working street lamp sputtered a gray-white circle down onto the pavement. Light clung to the coyote's rusty brown fur and pooled in his yellow eyes. Behind him loomed the dark, hollow shapes of the old enchantment factory, where the artificers had once worked. No need for a fuss, young sir. Being someone's dinner seems like a good reason to fuss. His mouth was dry, but Wick forced the words out even when they tried to stick to his tongue. He realized the other 2 predators had begun to circle around to either side. I've got food in my pockets. I can take my jacket off, and you can have it. The coyote chuckled. I've done my time eating beans and carrots. At my age, it's sweet marrow or starve. He lunged. Wick threw himself to the side, but the cracked sidewalk caught his toes and sent him tumbling. The coyote cut through the empty air where he'd been a moment before. Wick scrabbled backward, scraping his palms. The coyote struck again. This time Wick had nowhere to run. He lashed out with one foot and struck home on the coyote's chest. His legs strained, trying to push the Starstruck back. It was only the taste of the coyote's foul breath filling his mouth that gave him the strength to throw him off and roll to his feet. Don't worry, young sir, said the coyote, getting up more slowly, more carefully, a slurred sort of precision that Wick had only before seen on the rare occasions when Ismene was very, very drunk. A line of saliva matted the fur beside the coyote's mouth. Wick wiped his oozing palms on his trousers as if that would smear away the scent of blood. It'll be over fast. No, please! Wick's throat spasmed, trying to work loose something more convincing than groveling. I have something I need to do. So do I, said the coyote. Survive. And something hit him from behind. The coyote flew across the paving stones, straight past the hawk, who cawed her alarm. He rolled over, but did not rise from his hands and knees right away. Wick stared at him, his legs refusing to move for shock, and another predator's face loomed large in his vision. He gasped and brought his hands up. But the face in front of him did not belong to a bird or a mountain lion, but rather a red fox on a velocipede. Well, she said, you best get up on the handlebars then. Wick did not ask questions. He scrambled to a perch between the bars. The mountain lion lunged too late. The velocipede arced broadly around and sailed across the commons down 10th Street. One last howl sounded in the distance, and a hawk's angry shriek. Wick barely heard them over the wind rifling his hair, over the satisfied whoop of the fox in his ear. The fox rode the velocipede far down the hill until the predators had long since been left behind. Then she looped crosstown and rode back uphill on 7th. When the slope grew steeper near Midtown, she ordered Wick down from the handlebars. You're heavy and I'm tired, she said. You can walk for now. I can walk home from here. He hid his cringe at that word, home. Then he remembered his manners. Thanks for helping me. That was, I wouldn't have... His mouth scrunched into a frown. Thanks. She said. She put her rear paws on the ground and leaned on her handlebars. She was dressed neatly, brown breeches that ended at her knee and a practical white button-up shirt. In one ear she had 3 silver earrings, each one a hoop of a different size. Wick stared at those until she brought his attention back around with a question. You have people at home? He thought he knew the correct answer to that. Oh, yes, of course I do. My cousin and her wife, they'll be worried. Lie and truth churned gracelessly together in his mouth, and he said quickly, to chase away the taste, thank you, but I don't need any more help. Her tail lashed behind her, under the weight of a laden pack. Wick wondered how she managed to keep it from getting caught in the spokes of the bicycle. You can spend the night with Prish and I. We have got plenty to eat, and our garden has a 9-foot fence, so not much chance of a midnight visit from that coyote. Come along. She pushed off with one foot and called over her shoulder as she pedaled hard uphill. You don't honestly expect me to believe that these cousins of yours let you run around the city after dark? Another few pushes of the pedals, and then she said, You need a haircut. And a real bed to sleep in, I imagine. She rode up the hill slowly, with Wick tagging along beside. Must have been hard to turn the velocipede's wheels up the steep slope, Wick thought. He could have kept up, even if she pedaled at full speed. Her name was Elsing, she told him, and she had been a tailor in the old days. Or I should say, I'm still a tailor, she said. Just an idle one for the most part. Might as well say I'm not a fox if I don't have someone else's chicken in my mouth at the moment. He told her the story of Kaylin and Ismeni's departure from the city, or at least a version of that story that might pass muster. He wasn't entirely sure that long pointed nose of hers wouldn't sniff out the lie when he said he hadn't been able to find his cousin in the chaos after that eruption. Well, but surely they'll still be in the city looking for you, Elsing asked. No, all that matters to them is their little lowlands farm. They're probably glad I'm gone. He was certainly glad they were. They had tried to take him away from his city and his parents and all the answers he needed. If I saw them again, I bet they'd pretend they never even met me before in their life. He decided to change the subject, or at least redirect it. Have you got kids? Or, kits? Ah, she said, and her ears pressed back against her head. Yes, and no. The stars picked me, you see, but not them, and not their father either. Her ears flicked, then pricked up straight again. Wick thought she was going to say something else, but she didn't. And indeed, she didn't say much at all after that, not until she finally jumped off the bicycle. Wick thought she must have finally decided to push the thing uphill, but instead she went to the nearest gate and took a long iron key from her pocket. She limped a little as she walked, a lopsided drag of one foot. "Come in," she said. "Prish will want to meet you." And he followed her into the garden and stood staring while she set the velocipede against the porch and locked the gate back up behind them. The house that they had stopped at was no tailor's house. Its sides had space to breathe, with garden all around, and it stood a full 3 stories high. Tailors didn't live up city, not like this. But Elsing waited on the porch, yellow eyes glinting. "Well," she said, and he came up the steps. The front entry could have held Kalen's entire bakery. Wick craned his neck to gape at the chandelier. Artificer made, he could tell, with the sparkle of enchantment lighting each dangling crystal from within. His mother could have made such a thing. He tore his gaze from the chandelier and looked around. There was a great spiral staircase up into the second story, carpeted in plush maroon and gold, and real painted portraits on the rear wall. Portraits of human faces, no foxes to be seen. He looked sidelong at Elsing, but she was already halfway down the hall. "Prish, where are you? I'm home and I've brought a guest." "Elsing?" Heavy footsteps sounded on the staircase, and a head appeared over the railing. Not a human head, and not a fox's either. She had to be a radish. Thick yellow-green skin with dark pink indentations in the shape of 2 eyes and a mouth. A tangle of leaves spilled down from the top of her head and over the collar of her coveralls. "Do you realize how late it is? I've been worried sick, and if you disappeared now of all times—" She paused, and her eyes pinched narrow. "Who the devil is this?" "His name is Wick. He doesn't have any family left here, and he will be staying with us for the time being." Elsing dusted her hands on her pants. Her ears flicked when she looked back up at Prish, which made her earrings jingle. He'd got himself caught out by a gang of predators over in the shopping district. Probably some of Black Ear Pete's crowd. Prish leaned on the railing with both arms. Wick caught himself staring at her hands, which were made of thick green vines. He hadn't seen many Starstruck plants up close. They tended to be reclusive sorts. He jerked his eyes up to her face and found her pink mouth twisted into a smile. "One predator corners you, and your first choice is to jump in with another? Oh, for star's sake, dear, how many times do I have to say I am a scavenger and not a proper predator at all?" Elsing tutted. She dropped her pack on the floor and shooed Wick toward the staircase. "Come on, come along in, and don't you dare argue, Prish. He is not going back on the street with Pete and all of those on the prowl." And that is the end of what I pulled.
Oh, that is delightful.
I still really love that story.
Yeah. I love it too, having only heard 20 minutes of it. And in no small part because the fox and the radish are lesbians, Harold.
Yes, I do love Prish most of all. I was like, I have to read until I get to my lesbian radish
Uh-huh.
and her bisexual fox girlfriend and their adopted human boy that they've picked up off the street. Nope, you're ours now. Deal
Yep.
with it.
Sometimes a family is a lesbian radish, a bisexual fox, and an orphan boy.
And a crabby boy, and also there's a rock who is part of the family too. But
Oh, good for them. I love that.
Yeah, she's trouble, but I love her a lot too.
Oh.
I was gonna say good trouble, but she's not. She's just trouble. Just plain trouble. She's chaos.
Yeah. We know those sorts. I'm reading a lot of, I don't know. There's a lot of queer found family for obvious reasons. I'm right now, as we are recording this, still in the middle of reading Martha Wells' Network Effect, which I'm quite far behind on the Murderbot books at this point, but talk about found family. Sometimes a family is Polycule, their survey team, and the sec unit that they liberated kind of had already been liberated itself, but
Whose liberation they put all the legal ink
yeah.
behind. Yeah.
Oh, and an asshole research transport spaceship.
Yes. Oh, art was my favorite from those novellas, I think.
I love art so much. Um, and I love this queer Starstruck family immediately. Uh, can can you talk a little bit about kind of how this book came about, and then how it ended up being a thing that was in the trunk and then being read on this show?
Yeah. So I did write this. I think the first draft I finished in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
because I took it to Worldcon where I did the writing workshop, and in fact Martha Wells was the pro writer attached to that group, and she was lovely. Gregory Wilson also, two very kind writers, both super helpful, lovely people about it.
I love this for you.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and even if the book never went anywhere, it still was very helpful to participate in that process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where the idea came from, and this, I'm glad we got to Prish, because this, it sounds super weird even as I'm saying it in my head. But I was at that point in my life lightly obsessed with a particular vegetable from the farmer's market in Madison, Wisconsin, called a beauty heart radish, or less charmingly, in my opinion, a watermelon radish. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a daikon varietal, and it does have that pale green outside layer and just the most gorgeous purple pink interior. Um,
Ooh.
and then I also read at some point around that juncture about, in certain regions where pumpkins were not historically available, jack-o'-lanterns
Mm.
might be carved out of winter root vegetables like turnips. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't it be lovely to make a beauty heart jack-o'-lantern, a beauty heart lantern? And that was Prish. And she was the first being I sort of envisioned before working outward into this fantasy world where, alongside humans, there are also various creatures and plants that have found themselves randomly ensouled and
Mm-hmm.
transformed into something new. Um, I think I had the characters and then the ending, and then everything in between sort of mapped itself out from there.
Nice.
Yeah. And as for why it's in the trunk, I had somewhere between 80 and 90 rejections from agents on it.
Whew.
YA, well, yeah. YA is a tough nut to crack, I think.
Yeah.
And the book is strange, and it looking back at it, wow, 7 years later now, it is flawed, and I think it is, in that YA space, a difficult thing. It doesn't have a romance in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a difficult thing to market to young people if you are not already, say, Catherine Valente, which I am not.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I would love to revisit it still in some other form in the future, but I can definitely see, from here, that it is flawed and needs some restructuring in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's a novella, maybe it's still a book. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. I kind of like when you said novella, I was just like, yeah, novellas for kids should exist, and then I was like, that's chapbooks. That's like, the stuff I was reading when I was, you know, 9, 10, 11. Like in terms of length anyway. Like they were,
Yeah,
big kid novels to me, but uh,
yeah. Those early chapter books in that age range, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
'Cause, kids for books for kids are definitely larger than they were when I was a kid. And I remember Tamora
Mm-hmm.
Pierce talking about how they wouldn't let her write longer books for that audience in the 80s and 90s. And now my kids are really into the Wings of Fire books, which are about dragons and are cute and fun. And they're big. They're
Mm-hmm.
chonky little book lads.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah. I was just thinking like the I mean, I was reading like full length novels, or at least having those like full length novels read to me, even
Mm,
if they were like kids' books when I was a kid in the 90s, but that was like basically Redwall was the only thing in that space for me.
hmm Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then like eventually when I was like 12 or something, my dad tried to get me into Terry Pratchett by giving me Diggers, which didn't work out for him the way he wanted. It didn't quite land for me when I was 12, but then like 6 months later, I I heard him reading aloud a section of one of the adult Discworld novels, and I was like, no, that's what I want. Give me those
Mm,
things.
yes, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, Guards was on my reading list in 10th or
Mm-hmm.
11th grade that I was like, oh, yes,
Yeah.
more of this, please.
Yeah. I think I even mentioned this on the podcast fairly recently, but the scene what got me into Terry Pratchett was the scene in Hogfather where Nobby is supposed to go arrest Death at the mall and instead gets sat down on his lap and gets given a crossbow. And like, honestly, what else are you gonna get 12-year-old into fantasy novels with except for a horrid little creature of a cop getting given a crossbow by one anthropomorphic personification playing another one?
I think the first character, I think the first one I read was weirdly The Last Continent.
Oh, uh-huh.
I don't know how I got started in the middle of the series, but I was like, this librarian is an orangutan, and I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I stayed for Lady Sybil, who is my favorite.
Lady
Uh,
Sybil is objectively one of the best characters in the whole
she's
series.
so good. Oh, she's so good.
She's so good. And then, of course, in like the late, I mean, obviously Tiffany Aching the best, and Nanny Ogg and Granny Weatherwax as well. But I have a special place in my heart for Moist von Lipwig because he's terrible and mercenary and also just very good.
Yes, he's he's great, and I like seeing the opposite side of the guards in Moist's books. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is what Vimes looks like to people who aren't Vimes.
Yeah.
Mm,
Kind
yeah.
of the point where uh, Pratchett decided, like, oh, actually, a cab.
Yep.
Oh, books are good.
Books are good. Books are the best.
It's awesome that we can just like write books and then they exist.
And I get to share at least a little chunk of this one with you all.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's my favorite
It,
part of this show. Like, you know,
it does exist now outside of my own head and several agents'
yeah,
email trash folders.
yeah.
Makes it a little more real.
Only like 90 agents or so.
Only like 90. Ah,
Oh, that like so I some of our listeners may only be in the short story game, which
mm,
is its own kind of like crushing machine.
yes.
Uh, and I speak as somebody who has written a couple of novels ish, and uh, only ever submitted novels to like open calls. I've never
Mm,
done the agent game yet. At some point, maybe, probably when I can get my head screwed on a little bit better, but and finish a novel that isn't objectively extremely flawed. Uh,
They're
but
all flawed. They're all flawed the first time out. Then you get to play with them and make them less
yeah,
flawed, and that's the fun part.
that is the fun part. The one quote unquote finished novel I have right now that I could send out is 12 years old, and I do not want people reading. There are things that I wrote over a decade ago that I still stand by. This is not
Mm-hmm.
one of them.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Um, but I was wondering if you could, as somebody who both does the short story game, uh, for instance, with your wonderful response to cold calculations,
Oh, thank you.
uh, and also is in the long form game, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how that difference is for you in terms of like, when you're submitting a short story, generally there's no sim subs. When it's a novel, you're sending out 5, 10 queries at a time, depending.
Yeah, I think part of this is just how long I've been submitting short fiction, and I have a big catalog of stories at any given time, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot. There are still rejections that I'm like, well, guess I'll die then.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But like for the most part, it just kind of it's like, oh yeah, well, send it out to the next place, and I can keep churning that. I find the novel querying process 100 times more emotionally exhausting than
Mm-hmm.
short fiction. I think the difference is the time commitment for short fiction.
Right.
Like I might spend a few weeks to a couple months on a short piece, um, and not
Mm-hmm.
be working on it the whole time. Whereas a novel represents, for me, probably a year of frequent work, and that uh, having that bounce back over and over again is just like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have to send agent queries off in batches, and be like, gird my loins and just send off
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 at a go. Whereas short fiction, I see something in my inbox, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna check my submission tree, and the place I wanted to send it to next is open. Let's do it,
Yeah.
and roll with those punches a little more gracefully, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just like, I've done not for a while. I've kind of been out of the submission game in general for a couple of years, because
Mm-hmm.
it turns out producing a podcast, fair amount of work.
I
Something
can
they don't tell
imagine.
you
Yeah.
going into. That's a lie. Macy told me that making Serpent Cast was a lot of work, even though she wasn't the one actually producing the episodes on the back end. I, granted, don't have podcast homework in the same way that like the Serpent Cast crew did, but I've done a couple of years of like aim for 100 submissions in that year, and like that takes a toll. And it's also like, I'm pretty sure at least one of those 100 submission years I did actually get a sale, which like, you know and granted, pulling from I think a smaller, at the time, a larger queue of stories that I like stand behind, but smaller smaller queue than what you're working with. I am fairly certain I can say with authority.
Yeah.
And like, that's still like, that would just be like, oh, check my email in the middle of the day. Oh, rejection rolled in, send it out to the next place. And like, as opposed to, and with stories that I'd worked on for like you were saying, a couple of months at most, and even that was like fits and spurts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
spend a couple of days doing a first draft, hold on to it until the next writing group, and then do a couple rounds of revisions there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. People who do the novel submission game are made of some stern stuff.
I'm working on another novel right now and it's slow going and I think part of it is because I'm like I really am not excited about querying again at the end of this
Mm-hmm.
road. Yep.
Yeah.
But you got but I like telling stories, I like sharing stories with people, so I'm gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna complain about it
Yep.
while I do.
I mean, that's the key right there is, and like something we touch on the show pretty regularly is like community is important, and community is especially important for the parts that are so soul sucking. Like, yes, obviously, I'm not gonna say you have to have somebody to, read your stories and offer revision notes. I know there are people who just kind of write a story, put it away for a little while, pick it back up, pick it apart, make all
That's
the things work, and then send it out and get it sold. And like,
that's
all the
not
more
me.
power to them.
Yeah.
Couldn't be me. But like, that's doable, but even they need to be able to complain when, the rejections just keep rolling in.
And I feel like they do come in like like all all the acceptances for me would like I get like a couple at a time and then nothing for like 5 or 6 months. Like,
Mm-hmm.
well that was the end of my career. I guess I'm done now.
Yep.
Um and then that again. And then at some point I think I kind of figured out like, oh maybe it's not the end. Maybe I need to take a couple deep breaths and get over it and just come back in a couple weeks ready to submit again. It's okay. It's okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but that like the perspective there that takes a while to get to of like, actually, no, things do come in waves, and
Hmm.
the only place where your career is over is when you decide, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore.
Which is a valid like at some point like I think as writers it's we always say to each other like you can do it just keep submitting keep and at some point it's okay to feel the bad feelings and say if this is impeding my ability to feel joy and interest and curiosity in the process then like
Mm-hmm.
take the break babe I can walk away and like
Yeah.
just do writing for the sake of writing and not worry about where it's going to go and just not not try to push it.
Yeah. I compare this a little bit to music, and I don't like the concept of a one-hit wonder in music
Mm,
either, because like, the especially like the landscape of like what is popular music is so manufactured and like so capricious. But like the the idea of like there are authors who just wrote one book or just wrote three books, like, authors who have just one series and then walked away from the game for any number of reasons, and they still did amazing work, and like, what, no matter how much recognition those books may have gotten, like, they
hmm.
did the damn thing, you know.
And publishing is a grind. Like I'm not. There are days when I'm like, is this for me in the long term? And I think it is, but like it's a
Mm-hmm.
continuous process of reevaluating. Like, is this is this taking more from me than I am able to give or want to give, or can replenish?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my most of my sales in the last 4 or 5 years have been the sort of situation where I was directly or indirectly invited to submit something, where it's like, here's this call, solicited. That's the word I was looking for. I know how these things work. Where like I think it's okay to talk about this. Like Sarah Gailey's Personal Canons Cookbook
Oh, yeah.
series that's coming out. Like we were talking, and I was like, I have this idea for an essay for that, and they were like, yeah, please send that to me. And like that's coming out in early April
Oh, that's
of this
exciting.
year. And like that's, I think, the last thing I had in print before this was the story that I had out in the Skies of Wonder, Skies of Danger anthology that came out from
Oh, the Bible Paradise
yeah, from
loves
the Isle of
published.
Wight
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was edited by John Appel and Mary Agner, and I can't see where I have my copy on the shelves, so I can't say who. Oh, and Joe Miles, of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
Joe
Yeah.
Miles. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't know if you're listening, but I really appreciate your work on that anthology. And obviously, John, who was my editor there, who like when and that came out in what, 2017, 2018. Like it's been a while. It was certainly before the San Jose World Con, because we had like badge ribbons for Skies of Wonder for Worldcon, which was like a very cool experience to be like, I'm in the exclusive badge ribbon club.
That is fun. I love a badge ribbon.
I love a badge ribbon so much. I love the culture around badge ribbons and kids in tow, because you'll see the kids going around with like 5 feet of badge ribbons on. They will do anything to get a badge ribbon. Love that for them. But like that the story that I had in Skies of Wonder is not the first one I submitted. I submitted something, and John sent back like, I really like this. It would need some edits anyway, but it turns out that it's the only one that is not getting all three of airships, pirates, and wizards. Would
Mm.
you be interested in either heavily editing this to get the third element in? I was missing airships in the first, and like everybody else was like primary world or secondary world, like steampunk-ish adventure airship stuff, and mine was like gritty, like cyberpunk noir, present day. And I was like, no, I'll do something else, and like turned around a brand new story in a couple of weeks for that,
Oh,
where it's like that, which is all to say, just like I think that's a perfectly valid way of like navigating the like writing field.
hmm.
And like these are all, it always comes back to like there's no one right way. Like
Yeah.
everybody has a different path.
I don't think I have ever been solicited for a story, and I have a lot. I have a lot of publications. It's like
You
that's
have
I've
so
just
many
always
publications, Aimee.
I've just I've just worked through the slush a million times. So I'm not going to stop because I love stories.
Yeah, it's worked out.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it is it like there I think people often think that if you sell enough stories or books, then there's a point where you've made it. And I don't think with short fiction, with novels, with anything, I don't think that there is that point, and you
Yeah,
will always have to work your way up from some level into an editor's. heart over and over
Yeah.
again, and that is just and we do it.
Yeah. One of the most inspiring things a writer ever said to me, I took many years ago now, I took a short story intensive from Mary Robinette Kowal,
Hmm.
and she said, oh, yeah, I still, this was, gosh, 20, beginning of 2015, I want to say. And she said, yeah, I still haven't cracked FNSF or Clark's World. Like, I'm trying to do that. And I was like, Hugo winning, like, multiply Hugo nominated author Mary Robinette freaking Kowal has not
Hmm.
cracked FNSF or Clark's World. Like, anybody can do this.
Hmm. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the pros still get rejected. It is a grind.
Yeah. And like taking it back to Martha Wells, like, you know,
Yeah,
that was a long journey to get to be like Hugo winning Murderbot author Martha Wells.
what a
Like,
comeback. You love to
yeah,
see it. Yes.
we love to see, or Anne Leckie, same thing.
Hmm.
Like, I she was like 43 or something when Ancillary Justice came out.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah, doesn't matter. Time is
yeah,
fake.
yeah.
It's
Time is
all to
fake.
say, like, you know, if this is what you want to be doing, do it. Like,
And yeah, I, I it feels hopeless sometimes, but I always feel like if you generic you audience you still have faith in a story, like don't give up on submitting
mm-hmm,
it, even if it's racking up the rejections. It only takes one editor to say yes, and that was the reason it was a little bit hard for me to find something to read for the podcast. Kind of what you were saying earlier about like, oh, I like some of the stuff I wrote back then, but
yeah,
the stuff I wouldn't want people to see. Like all the short stories in my trunk were ones that I had sent out for a while, sometimes just once,
mm-hmm,
taken a look at, and after they'd been rejected, a couple before I'd even sent them out, I think, and thought, this is not doing what I wanted it to do.
yep,
Um, but if I still have faith in a story, then it will go out the door a million times till hell won't have it.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The I just wanted to jump on that bit of like sometimes even before you sent it out, saying like, oh, this isn't do it. Like, that is a huge that was a huge milestone for me to get to that point where I could be like, finish a story and realize it wasn't doing it
Hmm.
and not send it out.
It's hard to give up that work, but it's also a learning experience to say, okay, well, what went right with this? Why did I think it was a story, and what went wrong? What is how is it not doing? How is it not
Mm-hmm.
achieving the thing that I want it to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like sometimes that's realizing it's not your story to tell. Sometimes it's really
Hmm.
realizing like I just don't have, the whatever to be able to make the story pull it off like I want it to right now, and I can revisit the concept in, a
Yeah,
year,
stick it in
5 years,
the
10 years,
revise
whatever.
folder. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you still like the idea, just sit on it. I have a large folder full of like, is this an idea?
Yep.
Notes, and at some point, they'll happen or they won't.
Or they
And
won't.
it's nice
And
to it's nice to have that list to be when I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. But what about
yeah.
this thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just heard this weird noise, and this blue police box showed up in the room, the podcast room. And I'm wondering if at this point we could take a step inside this time machine. Here it is. And go back if there are any words of wisdom that you wish you could offer to past writer Aimee Ogden, and by extension to any of our dear listeners.
Hmm. I wow. I submitted my first stories when I was in college, and I'm dating myself by saying this around 20 years ago. Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
I took a long break after that. What
Fair.
did college age Aimee need to know? Uh, I think the first thing college age Aimee needed to know was that a title that has a pun in it is not a great basis for a whole story. Um,
What are you
uh,
talking about?
it can be, but maybe not as often as she thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think she needed to know that everyone knows to celebrate a sale or a nomination or things like that. But that celebrating submission milestones or rejection milestones
Mm-hmm.
makes it a lot easier to kind of get that inured feeling to those rejections rolling in.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
because they will. And I think I wish she hadn't taken such a long break. She got a few rejections and was like, "Well, this is crap, and so am I. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll be done." I think she probably would have liked to know that my her most rejected story was rejected about 20 times and then sold to analog.
We'll love to
um,
see it.
it's you don't know, don't do not it's such a cliche, but don't self-reject. You don't know what an editor hasn't seen before, and is it's going
Mm-hmm.
to be the thing that makes them say, yeah, oh wow, okay, that was cool. I
Yeah.
wasn't
Or
expecting that.
the thing that the editor's looking for to fill that slot in an issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, they don't usually publish Flash, but they don't. The guidelines say they'll take it. Maybe they need 900 words to fill out an issue. Who knows? Try it.
Yeah.
The worst thing, as I'm also an editor at Translator Travelers Lounge, and when I say we'd like to see more stories from you, that's not a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Don't stop sending us stuff. We like your stories. We can only put a certain number in every issue. We always have more great stories than we can fit.
Yep.
Just keep trying. Don't
Yeah.
don't if you don't want to stop, don't stop.
The one time I was making direct editorial decisions when me and Annalie Flowerhorn uh, got a chance to take over part of Friends Journal, notably not a fiction magazine, a magazine of Quaker essays for the most part, but we bullied the editor finally over Twitter into letting us run an issue of Quaker speculative fiction, and like we got, obviously we got a lot of things that were direct hard nose in the first sentence because that is what editing is, and we also got more things than that we loved than we could publish.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That is has always been the case for us over
yeah,
at TTL.
and it's a little bit different running a magazine that publishes multiple issues versus editing a
Hmm.
special insert where
Yeah.
we
You can't say,
we
"Oh, send it to me next time," or "Send me something
yeah
new next time." No, no,
like
there isn't one of those.
I do want to like do wish that I could have said like the next time I'm editing a thing, like please send me something, but like I don't know when the next time I'm going
Yeah.
to edit a thing is
It's a
cuz
vague
I
timeline. Yeah.
yeah, you know. I I would solicit you for a podcast episode at some point, but like I'm my like queue, I almost have 2023 already filled out,
Yeah. Wow.
and which is also a wild thing to say. Looking out, we are this is the final episode of season 4 of Tales from the Trunk. Next month we'll be starting season 5, which is bizarre and unreal. And like when I started season 1, I was only looking like 3 4 months out. Like I didn't have a full season filled out when I started the season because I didn't even know what I like if this was a thing that was going to hang on.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on 4 years, four
Thank
seasons.
you. Yeah, it's been a really great and also extremely wild thing that I've been doing.
We need more great and wild things in our lives, so
We
that's a good one to
absolutely
have.
do. Speaking of great and wild things, I'm wondering if there are any books, stories, anything else that you have either out recently or upcoming or out not so recently that you'd just be so hyped for our listeners to know about.
Well, my big one, I have my third novella is coming out this summer. It is called Emergent Properties,
Woo!
and it is a sci-fi adventure fun story about an AI journalist who is trying to get behind some corporate government malfeasance and mystery. And
Nice.
also their moms are really overbearing. And so that was fun to write. That this book is for everyone with a fraught parental relationship or two.
Mm-hmm. And will be out on July 23rd of this
July
year.
23rd, yeah. So that is coming out, and it is available for pre-order now wherever pre-orders are pre-ordering.
Yep. Wherever
What
fine books are pre-orderable.
what else? What else? I have I think the thing I've had out recently that I'm the fondest of is I have a flash fiction in Strange Horizons, which is one that I have wanted to crack
Ooh.
since college. When Jed Hartman sent the nicest rejections to those
Aw.
little pun title stories. And it is a flash fiction called A Love Letter Written at the Heat Death of the Universe. And I am very fond of that one and very fond of the magazine, the publication in which it is appearing. And
Yeah.
last but not least, we have a new issue of Translunar Travelers Lounge, which I think by the time this goes live will have recently gone up on February 15th.
Yeah, so this will go live just a couple days later, I
Yeah,
believe.
perfect timing. So head on
Yeah.
over there, everybody, and check it out. We've got 14 delicious new stories for everyone to enjoy.
And I will just say that TLTL is one of my favorite new magazines in recent years.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, like it's we see so many good markets close up shop for one reason or another over the last few years. Like, we thankfully the Deadlands is here, but like Shimmer
Mm.
closed,
Oh, that was
Fireside closed, like
devastating. Oh,
big losses, but we also got like Translunar Travelers Lounge, we got Augur, like there's some heavy hitters in there.
I'm proud to be listed among those. That is and it's been I can't believe this is going to be our eighth issue. It's been so much fun to read
Oh,
everyone's stories.
congratulations.
Thank you. And to working with Bennett is awesome. They are a great friend and a great co-editor and really good
Mm-hmm.
also at speaking of getting critiques from people at kicking my stories butts in all the ways that they needed to be kicked all the time. So
Yep. Fabulous. I will also make mention of Local Star, which is just a rollicking good time. I've loved that book since the cover reveal.
oh
Honestly, it like the cover told me a lot of good things about the book, both by just having just like some really delightful art, and also it said Aimee Ogden on the cover.
I have to say I've been extremely lucky in terms of covers for all my novellas and I feel so lucky.
Hell yeah.
So thank
Uh,
you, Interstellar Flight Press, for that great cover, and the folks at Tor.com for making my books look pretty. Please judge these books by their cover. Thank you.
yeah. Yes. So before we wrap things up, have there been any pieces of media, be they books, movies, podcasts, video games, tabletop role-playing games, you name it, anything that you've been really digging that you want our audience to know about?
Yes, I loved in I think last month's Uncanny, maybe it was December, Flower, Daughter, Soil, Seed by Evgenia Triantafylou. Just a gorgeous story, as is her wont.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jennifer Hudak had Sturgeon Moon Jam in Fantasy magazine recently. And the other thing that I really enjoyed and I read with my kids is Stephanie Burgess's young adult book, The Dragon with the Chocolate Heart, which is
Oh,
just
yeah.
so sweet and charming, and I really enjoyed it. I'm also the last person on the planet, perhaps, to see Everything Everywhere All at Once, um,
Mm-hmm.
which we managed to sneak in while my kids were at a sleepover because we live in a one-bedroom apartment right now, and they sleep in
Yep.
the office, and there's no door, so we can't watch things at night unless they're gone. And so we watched it with French subtitles, which was exciting because I read
Nice.
French. My spouse does not. So it was me frantically translating when I could think of it fast enough, and it really added to the inherent chaos of the movie. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that really just embellished that effect and just made it even more.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of the way I first watched My Neighbor Totoro was, I mean, not with French subtitles, it was just the Japanese audio, no
Hmm.
subtitles, with a bunch of other college students crammed into a tiny dorm room, and one student who spoke Japanese roughly, and would translate for us as quickly as she could, but also like that movie is just a vibe.
Hmm. Yeah. And yeah, it becomes a movie and an experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
think the acting in that movie was also good enough that when I was just like,
mm-hmm.
it still got across, well, most of
Yeah.
what it needed to do. It's effective. Yes.
It is effective and
Hmm.
super super deserved the recent accolades.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes, all of them, all of the things, all the awards, and put them in all of the movies and shows.
Yeah.
More, please.
Yes. Uh finally, finally, for real. Uh Aimee, where can our listeners find you elsewhere?
I am mostly social media wise on Mastodon these days, and I'm at Aimee Ogden at wandering.shop over there. And I have a website, amyogdenwrites.wordpress.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter there. And I'm going to send the first one of those any day now. But for real,
Woo!
any day now. Yes.
I believe in you. Well, Aimee, it has been such a delight to have you on the show. What a way to round out our fourth season. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to be here.
Absolutely. Uh, Listeners, stick around next month for the start of season 5 of Tales from the Trunk, when my guests will be Malka Older and Susan Palumbo. Which, like, what a get on both fronts.
Yeah, those are two episodes that I will have to tune in for those.
Yeah, I'm very excited for Malka's new book, and I reached out to Susan. She was like, "Yeah, absolutely, will
Yeah.
come on."
Yeah, because Susan also has a collection dropping later this year that everyone should also get out there and pre-order that.
Yes,
Go, go.
yeah. We will certainly talk more about that
Mm.
in a month, and it is February, so it is exactly 4 weeks from. This isn't a, no. This is 2023. It's not a leap year. Who knows? Time is fake. Exactly 4 weeks away. Tune in for Susan's episode. Find out all the deets. I don't know, I haven't recorded it yet, so I can't say any specific nice things about it, but I'm sure it's going to be a blast. Tales from the Trunk is mixed and produced in beautiful Oakland, California. Our theme music is Paper Wings by Lillian Boyd. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/trunkcast. All patrons of the show now get a sticker and logo button, along with show outtakes and other content that can't be found anywhere else. You can still find the show on Twitter at Trunkcast, and also on Tumblr at Trunkcast. And I tweet at HBBisnieks, and I'm on Mastodon at HBBisnieks at wandering.shop. If you like the show, consider taking a moment to rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. And remember, don't self-reject.